Hello, everybody. And if you are not on the West Coast, good afternoon. If you are, good late afternoon or good late morning. I want to introduce myself. My name is Jen Amber, and I'm with Women in Manufacturing. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out today to join us for our webinar on registered apprenticeship programs and recruiting for them. So before we get started, I have a little video for you just to kind of give you some background and some info on registered apprenticeship programs.
I think when I'm talking with companies and they may be interested in it, the important thing for me to remind them is people today just can't afford not to have employment, right? And yet employers are screaming and saying, we need people with skills, we need the right skills. Doing a custom apprenticeship, they're able to develop the program into what they need as an employer and give the employee a chance to not only have employment while they're learning, but also to have those incremental pay increases so they know it's a growing thing for them.
I think the apprenticeship is really going to help my family life one day because I also can make a good income now. So it's not just relying on my husband or relying on somebody else. We have two good incomes, and I think that's really going to help because a lot of females, I think, don't think that they can go into trades that you can make a lot of good money in, but you can if you just put your mind to it, and it's really helpful when you have two solid incomes.
The apprenticeship program has helped me in my personal life by allowing me to complete my degree without student loans. I have 0 loans, which is an amazing thing to say and an amazing thing to feel, especially at 23 years old. And the financial benefits have been fantastic because I've also been able to buy a house this year.
The apprenticeship program has helped me in my family life in more of a financial way, first of all, because it did help me get my first associate's degree at a university for free, and that was a huge difference for us. And now, as my husband and I are expecting, it let us buy our first home when we got married. So I actually was a homeowner at 19 years old, which is pretty rare. So that has really helped. I also make a very nice wage for myself at the age I am, and it's also, I've been a full-time employee, so I have a retirement plan already set up and everything, and I'm really ahead in life in this aspect.
And as it says at the end of the video, if I could advance, there we go. If you have any questions at any given time, please reach out to us. My email is on there. It's jambern@womeninmfg.org. I'll also put that in the chat for everybody once Dorinda gets started. And please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Our services are free. We have great resources just like Dorinda, just like Jobs for the Future, that can help you on your journey to either create your registered apprenticeship program or grow your registered apprenticeship program, especially when it comes to getting more women into your program, which obviously is one of our major goals here at Women in Manufacturing. So I will put both of these links in the chat, so fear not that you have to write down, especially our long website address, so it'll be there for you. But in the meantime, let's get started, and I want to have the pleasure of introducing Dorinda Byers. And Dorinda and I became friends maybe about 4 or 5 months ago now, and I feel like she has become not only a dear friend, but also one of the best resources I can ask for. She has a very diverse background in workforce, outreach, sales, economic development, in community college, manufacturing, and universities. So she has a wide array of expertise. And she is great at the resource of recruiting, especially for registered apprenticeship programs. So this is technically part 2 of her webinar, but fear not if you missed the first one, because this will give you all brand new information and she will make you feel nice and comfortable. But you can find that one on our YouTube page as well. After this program is done, we are recording it and we will put it on our YouTube page as well, and I'll send out that link to everybody. So if you want to share it to somebody else, go right ahead. In the meantime, Dorinda, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen, for that warm welcome. I love WIM, so it's such a pleasure to be here today with you and appreciate the opportunity. I also have my wonderful colleague, Dina Igoe, here with me, who is an absolutely fabulous resource as well for apprenticeship and recruitment. So Dina will be helping us if we have some questions. So thank you, Dina, for being here today. And thanks to all of you for being here as well. So we have some great content for you today. We're going to jump into that. But first of all, it is the spring season. And so what does that mean? Spring cleaning. So we're going to start with a little joke. So we actually have a joke ready for you all. And we're going to start with that before we launch into our program. So our joke is, what did the broom say to the mop? And the answer is, I'm so tired of people pushing us around. So with that, we are going to launch into our topic today. And our topic for today is recruitment for registered apprenticeship programs. So this is something that's on everybody's mind today. How do we get the right talent to the right place at the right time? Specifically today, we're going to talk about how to do that with apprenticeships. So our objectives for today, we're going to talk a little about our supply chain automation workforce hub. That is the group that Dina and I work for. We're also going to talk about some successful recruitment techniques, specifically how do we connect with some of those students in Gen Z. We're going to talk about universal versus targeted outreach and using data for better recruitment. So that's what's on our agenda for today. So a little about the supply chain automation workforce hub. We are one of the Department of Labor's industry intermediaries. And what does that mean to you? Well, we are able to provide technical assistance to registered apprenticeships all around the country. What kind of support can we provide? Well, we can provide things like helping register a program, strategies for DEI, strategies for recruitment and outreach, standards development. We have lots of opportunities to work with apprenticeships to help you establish a new program or to get a program back up and running if it's been dormant for a while. Best of all, our services are available to you at no cost because we are one of those Department of Labor intermediaries. You'll also see here some of the other intermediaries listed. We partner very closely with them. So for example, if you might be interested in maybe something to do with clean energy, we can get you connected to the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. So we do partner very closely with our fellow intermediaries. We also just ran an apprenticeship accelerator down in the Cincinnati area. So we are pulling together companies, schools, we're pulling together those resources like workforce boards, state government officials, trying to pull them into the conversation about apprenticeship and also learning and sharing best practices. So that's something else that we do. Dina and our team do a lot of work around putting together those events all over the country to really help make those connections and to promote the world of apprenticeship. We are a one-stop solution for training and recruiting supply chain automation specialists and recruiting those types of positions for apprenticeship. So supply chain is expected to grow very significantly over the next few years, potentially as many as 72,000 new jobs by next year, and additionally more than 770,000 additional jobs to be created as well. So we are looking to try to help fill those talent gaps everywhere we go. That's one of the top challenges we hear. We're powered by our partners. So folks like employers, workforce organizations, educational institutions, we're all working together. So our goal is, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, to bring the right people to the table and the right resources to the table to help companies and individuals prosper through apprenticeship. We want to help develop those new registered apprenticeship programs and also, like I mentioned, jumpstart dormant ones. So if there's a program that's been dormant for a while and maybe you need some help with that, we can also help with that. We also can help expand apprenticeship programs. So that's something else that we do is expand those. We also want to focus on diversity and really getting more diverse talent into apprenticeships. So like Jen mentioned earlier, if we can get more women engaged, if we can get more underrepresented populations engaged in apprenticeship, that is a huge focus for us because that apprenticeship can be a pathway to prosperity for those individuals. We also want to get our veterans engaged with apprenticeship. So that's another opportunity for us, is to engage those veterans. And then finally, like I mentioned, we are providing support at no cost to you. Because of the fact that we are a Department of Labor intermediary, we can provide all of that support to you at no cost. What are some of our services that we provide? Well, I mentioned the Apprenticeship Accelerator and the outreach and education. So things like this webinar today. Something that many companies are also interested in is that marketing and recruitment and our financial incentives and technical assistance. We do have a technical assistance and support fund available to companies that companies can apply for new apprenticeships, and we'll talk a little more about that. We also offer technical assistance with data collection. There's a lot of data to be collected with apprenticeships, and we can help make sure that you're collecting the right data. Registration, we actually just developed a new fact sheet on this topic to try to help companies navigate that maze of state versus national registration of apprenticeships and new programs. We can also help modify those existing registered apprenticeship programs, offer different types of training, such as train the trainer, mentoring, or diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And then we can also help identify some funding opportunities. We're actually working on a series of fact sheets right now about funding, and Dina's leading that effort for our team. So we also provide those kinds of resources to you: fact sheets, webinars, information. If you check out our website, you will find a whole host of different information and resources there, and some of the past webinars and things that we've done. Specifically, this week is Youth Apprenticeship Week. So we also support those kinds of special events. And this is the first ever Youth Apprenticeship Week. So we are working on, for example, a series of videos for that Youth Apprenticeship Week to help celebrate those youth and apprenticeship as well. So what does our funding look like that I mentioned? Well, we can actually help offset the costs of apprenticeship. How do we do that? Up to $1,000 for new apprentices, up to $500 for returning apprentices. And we have up to $30,000 per sponsor or employer per year. We can use it for things like training, costs that might be related to the on-the-job training, train the trainer costs or activities, training equipment, possibly things like supplies for apprentices that they may need, such as PPE, for example. So we have all sorts of different ways we can utilize that funding. Our funding is available on a first come, first serve basis. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out to us and we can help you get that funding application in. So you might be eligible for some of this funding. If there's an opportunity that your program has where you have a gap and you could use some additional help, please reach out to us and we can hopefully maybe help you take advantage of some of that funding that we have available. So a couple of things we want to do first before we talk about apprenticeship recruitment is set the stage a little bit. What kinds of perceptions are we facing out there among especially the Generation Z workers that everyone is looking to recruit as that next generation of talent coming into some of our skilled types of careers and apprenticeships? What are we facing? Well, an interesting study just came out, and these are a few of the highlights that we found from that study. So we have a little work to do. When we're thinking about industrial careers, only 14% of Gen Z think that it's a career they might want to consider. 25% believe work conditions are unsafe in industrial jobs. 20% think pay is low. 14% feel benefits aren't good. 38% also said they have little to no understanding of what industrial workers might do. And then also when we think about Gen Z, 78% of those high school students are thinking they would like to determine their career path before they leave high school. And 63% of high school students believe that on-the-job training should be their primary learning after they graduate. So in other words, although we have some challenges listed on this slide, we also have some opportunities. Apprenticeship can be an awesome way for those students who want to learn on the job to learn on the job. And we also can potentially start engaging some high school students in conversations for apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship and get them engaged before they graduate from high school to help meet them where they are. This generation is also a generation who's looking for authentic experiences. So Dina and I just recently did the Apprenticeship Accelerator event in Cincinnati that I mentioned, along with some of our team. We had some youth apprentices there who were still in high school, and I was able to have a conversation with them. And one of the things they said that was very meaningful and helpful to them was a personal experience and someone reaching out to them personally to tell them about the program and letting them experience that. So that word of mouth was very important to these young men who in this case were in a machining apprenticeship. So those types of word of mouth experiences is something that Gen Z is looking for because they're an authentic generation. They've been bombarded with information. So if their peers can help them to make those connections, that's great. And also if we can help them make those connections by being out there doing outreach to hopefully combat some of these stereotypes that they may have about apprenticeship types of roles. Something else that's a little bit of a brighter note for us, and some of you may have seen this, this was in the Wall Street Journal recently. Gen Z is being called the tool belt generation. And why are they being called that? Well, because as we see here in some of the different skilled trades occupations, we are seeing that median age go down. So if you look at this, carpenters, for example, electricians and plumbers, we're seeing that median age go down. So what that tells us is we have more young people who are entering those skilled trades. Specifically, the number of students studying construction rose 23% from 2018 to 2024. And then also we have construction pay rising by 5.1%. So we also have students pursuing HVAC careers increasing by 7%. So we are seeing students get more interested in the kinds of skilled trade opportunities that we have and that apprenticeship can offer. So that's another potential bright spot for us as we think about recruiting. How do we get that word out there on some of these opportunities and let them know what we have to offer? Opportunities. So only 17% say they might consider an industrial career if they know somebody who's working in that area, but 26% of Gen Z think the hours could be rigid. 40% say flexible hours and work days are an opportunity, and 27% want to work for a company that's on the forefront of new technologies. So, how do we communicate the new technologies that we are utilizing in our work every day? Things like AI, things like robotics. How do we get that word out and let young people know that we are using that technology? There was also a very interesting article recently in the Wall Street Journal about Land O'Lakes. And Land O'Lakes, and I can send that to you, Jen, we may want to get it out to the group, implemented a flexible schedule model. And since then, the number of applications that they have has increased by 4 times over what they previously had. And they're having a much deeper applicant pool than they previously had. So if we can think about how we might be able to offer things like flexible hours and how we can promote the new technologies that we're offering, like Supply Chain Automation Hub, that could help us with our apprenticeship recruitment. A couple of other things to note, outreach is very key to this population. So we have to make sure we're reaching out because there are a lot of negative stereotypes out there about apprenticeship. Specifically, people may confuse it with things like internship, or people may think that it's all union, it's all time-based, etc. There's just a lot of misconceptions out there about apprenticeship. So we have to work that much harder, not only to combat the negative perceptions potentially about skilled trade, but also about apprenticeship. And we can't just think about the generations that we need to reach. We also have to think about the influencers. So not just the potential apprentices, but those who are influencing them. People like teachers, people like guidance counselors, people like parents, grandparents. How are we going to reach those influencers, if you will, also who are helping these students to make career decisions? So what motivates Gen Z? You'll notice here some of their preferences for communication. They're looking for that open and honest communication. They're looking for regular feedback. They're also looking for video content. So I just talked Friday to one of our really large workforce boards in Ohio who covers about 44 counties. And he recently did a study with Gen Z. And what he found was YouTube is a top source of information for them. So is there a way that we could make some videos about some of our apprenticeship opportunities and feature some of our apprentices, much the way Jen did at the beginning, tell their stories and feature that on our website? and feature that as a way to help with our recruitment, because that's what this generation is looking for, small bite-sized content. And they're also looking for that video content. And once they get on the job, they're looking for that face-to-face communication. And what we talked about a little earlier with that opportunity to have personal contact with someone and that word of mouth. So some questions to think about asking some of our young employees who are currently on our payroll. What platforms are they using to learn about jobs? What stereotypes are out there about our field? What workplace trends might we have? How do we make our industry more appealing? So we can take advantage of the fact that we may have some young talent currently on our payroll and ask them some of these questions to help better inform our recruitment strategy for apprenticeship. They can tell us information. Some tips on social media. 90% of all teens specifically are using social media. So that is a valuable tool for us. Social media can also offer us the opportunity, as it says here on the slide, to have multiple touch points and to personalize those touch points, because we can see what that particular potential apprentice is interested in when we're looking at their social media. So we have a lot of information available to us that we can then use to personalize. This is a generation who has grown up digitally, so they also expect us to be responsive. They also want to see current information. So we want to make sure that we are active on social media, particularly that we are posting those stories of current apprentices. We also want to use hashtags so we can make it simple for them to find us. We want to include diversity. When people are looking at our program, they want to see someone that looks like them. So how do we make sure that we are posting diverse types of content out there that showcase different kinds of populations in our program? We also want to avoid jargon, and we want to try to look at timing posts well. A couple of the things that we have seen some folks do is put posts out there at different times, for example, Tuesday morning, and see what kind of traction they get versus a Friday afternoon post. So you can try some experiments with social media and see what kinds of response rates that you have, depending on various times that you maybe post content. When are you getting the most engagement? When are you getting the most clicks? When are you getting the most views? So that's another great piece about social media. There's a lot of data available to us. If we utilize that, it can help us really inform our strategy. The other thing is it mostly takes time. It's not always very expensive to do social media. You can also think about possibly putting some different postings out there through things like Google or those sorts of ads to try to target and again, see what kind of response rates you get. It can be very cost effective to do those types of ads, and you may be surprised at some of the results that you might get from that as well. One of the other things we want to think about is once we have someone engaged with us, they've seen us on social media, they've expressed an interest, how do we make sure that they have a great experience with us? And we're going to talk a little more about this later with an opportunity to mystery shop. But one of the things we want to do is make it easy for candidates to apply. And we want to keep in mind, a lot of people are using their phones. I'm trying to hold my phone up, but a lot of people are using their phones to apply. So if our processes are not mobile friendly, we're missing out on an opportunity because a lot of people may be using their phones to apply with us. So we want to make sure that we're mobile friendly. We also want to make sure that we're active and responsive when someone is contacting us. Who's going to be responsible for following up with that person? And what does that timeline look like? Do we want to follow up with someone within, I would think, 24 hours? But what's that standard going to look like? And who's going to be responsible for following up when a potential apprentice does contact us? We also want to make sure that our candidates understand what the process is. Again, apprenticeship can be kind of complex potentially to people. We need to break that down and talk about this is what our process looks like to bring an apprentice in and make sure that we are explaining that. We also want to make them feel welcome and follow up with someone as soon as we know we aren't going to be moving them forward in the process, or when we know we are. Make sure that we are following up with them so they know what their options are and they can proceed accordingly. Another strategy that we have seen that can work very well is to place apprentices into a cohort group. So making sure that we create a cohort of apprentices so that bonding starts immediately and those apprentices are supporting each other right from the get-go. So we're building those bonds and we're building that support system for those apprentices immediately. So we really want to do that and make sure that our apprentices have each other to lean on as well, so they can provide support to each other. And also, if one apprentice maybe doesn't feel comfortable asking a question, maybe someone else would. So providing that cohort allows for those questions and that dialogue and that support to begin very early on in our process. How do we connect with our students? Well, I mentioned earlier that word of mouth is very critical. I recently facilitated a panel for the Ohio Oil and Gas Association and had a couple of high school teachers there. And I specifically asked them, what's the best way to connect with students? And to actually come out and see students was strongly encouraged. And then also to have a hands-on activity, something that the students could actually engage with. So is there something we can take out there that the students can do that represents our business? Is there something that they could look at, something they could touch, something they could put their hands on? So when you're going out to those open house events, not just being there passively, but having something available at your table to actually engage those students. We also want to make sure we're collecting contact information from those students and planning a follow-up strategy. So if someone comes out and expresses an interest in our program at an open house, what's our strategy going to be again for that follow-up? What does that look like? Who's going to be responsible? When do we want to follow up? And what will the follow-up encompass? Also, students today expect, again, that digital presence. They've grown up online. We want to make sure that we have a trustworthy and enticing website. We don't want to have outdated content there. We want to make sure that our content is current and that students, and again, those influencers look at that and they can see that our content is current and that it's relevant and that it's appealing. So we want to make sure that that checks the box. And we'll talk a little about that as well here a little later about how we can maybe take a look at our website and actually have someone mystery shop that website and give us that feedback to us. So there might be somebody in your circle that you can say, hey, let's mystery shop the website. So I could say to, my nephew, for example, well, hey, Braxton, go onto this website and give me your feedback on it. So it doesn't cost us much to ask for that feedback from someone who's in that key demographic. And what do they think of the website and what opportunities might they suggest for us improving that? We also want to make sure we use those multiple touch points. Young people are consuming more content, so using more social media channels to build that enthusiasm. And again, just as Jen did at the very beginning, using those past program graduates to sell your program. So using those success stories who have gone on and been successful and letting them tell their story about why registered apprenticeship can be a great choice is very powerful to this generation. They're looking for that authentic and meaningful content. And if we can provide that to them, it's going to be extremely relevant to them as they are making their choices and making their decisions. Also, we could take those apprentices out with us to those open houses and let them tell their story there and let them talk about what they experienced in the apprenticeship program and why it might be a good choice for someone. So really leveraging those past program graduates to help sell our program is another great way we can do that. We also want to be intentional in our recruitment. We can start tracking the sources of where we get our best apprenticeship leads and possibly looking for more sources like that. And then we can also make sure that we are intentional about who we are targeting. So we want to look for individuals who are going to be successful in our program and help them see themselves in that program and that future in our program. So being intentional about recruitment is also very helpful. And again, we need to think not just about how do we connect with students, but how do we connect with those influencers who are influencing students' choices, specifically parents, teachers, and grandparents, which were ranked very high by students as those who help influence their career choices in a recent survey that I saw. Developing pre-apprenticeship programs. This is a great way to start making sure that we have an additional pipeline into our program. It helps give a jump start to individuals and helps them see what we are doing in our program. It's almost like a sneak peek at our program, if you will. So we can engage potential apprenticeship candidates and students very early on. And we can also offer them a pathway. So that pathway is something that also a lot of our young people and individuals are looking for these days. If I come in as this, how do I get to that? So they're really looking for those steps in between. And a pre-apprenticeship is a great way to give individuals that jump start and that head start. So we want to have some flexibility in those programs, and we also want to target those underrepresented groups with pre-apprenticeship. We also can get the community involved in pre-apprenticeship. So if we're out there, for example, working with a high school, maybe a summer youth program, we can get the community engaged in our program, and the pre-apprenticeship then can be a great pathway to start helping the student build up a track record of success. Some of our students need to believe in themselves and they need to build that confidence. The pre-apprenticeship can be a great way to do that because it's a little less intimidating maybe than signing up for the whole commitment of an apprenticeship. And once they get some success under their belts, they start to get that confidence up and believe that they can do it in the sense of taking on a whole apprenticeship program. So some universal versus targeted outreach, successful recruiting techniques. So all RAP sponsors must conduct universal outreach and recruitment. The universal outreach involves reaching out to organizations within your recruitment area that can refer candidates from all demographic groups. And recruiting widely can also generate referrals from all demographic groups, including individuals from underrepresented groups. So when we think about our outreach, we want to think about what kinds of events should we be attending? What kind of data do we have to inform our approach? When I talked earlier about where are we getting most of our apprenticeship candidates, are we tracking that kind of information? If we're not, then we should be, because data gives us that basis that we can start to better inform our efforts going forward. We also want to think about how are we going to recruit from all demographic groups? So how are we going to reach out to women? How are we going to reach out to underrepresented populations? How are we going to reach out to veterans? So what are specifically going to be the strategies that we're going to use to make sure that we get that very diverse candidate pool? How are we going to, back to that conversation earlier about collect data, how are we going to make sure that we're collecting a database of the various different sources and organizations that we are recruiting from? So making sure that we are keeping track of that information and that we have that readily available to us. We also might want to look at what other programs are doing and who's successful at recruitment and how can we learn from them and have some of those conversations. A tool you may not be aware of when you think about your outreach and recruitment efforts is the Universal Outreach Tool. This tool is available to you at no cost and can help you provide some different sources. It can help you find sources and develop those lists, identify contacts at various sources, and also provide those sources with advance notice of all apprenticeship openings, which is something that's required of registered apprenticeship sponsors. So you see here an example from Ohio of who is listed in that Universal Outreach Tool. And this can help us get started with kind of building that list of recruitment sources. So this tool is available to you at no cost and can be a great way to start building that list of sources and contact information for those various sources as well. So if you haven't checked that out by all means. Some targeted outreach and recruitment. So one of the things we want to think about here is how are we providing equal opportunity to all candidates? So again, we want to make sure that we have a strategy for all types of candidates, underrepresented populations, and if we're stereotyped, for example, in our occupation as such as Caucasian males, we want to make sure that images for our program include those non-traditional and underrepresented populations. For example, we want to make sure we have women featured. We want to make sure that we have minorities featured in our recruitment materials. So making sure that we are equal and open to all in our recruitment efforts and in our outreach efforts. That's very important that we have all qualified individuals and we are reaching them. We also want to make sure, again, that we have that strategy for those underrepresented populations. What specifically are we going to do to reach those underrepresented populations? And then that last bullet point, very important, Sponsors who have 5 or more apprentices need to make sure that you have an affirmative action program and that you are looking at how the demographics of your apprenticeship compare to the workforce demographics of your service area. That is something, again, that's required by DOL, and we're going to touch a little more on that on our next slide. So conducting that targeted outreach and recruitment, developing those programs, again, requires taking a look at the demographics of your current apprentice population and comparing those to the demographics of the workforce in your area. So if there are areas where your program falls short, for example, the demographics of, let's say, the workforce in your area have 50% women, but there's only 25% women in your apprenticeship program, you want to conduct some targeted outreach and recruitment because that is required. So you're going to need a specific strategy then, in this case, for how you would better reach out to women. That is something, again, that we at the Supply Chain Automation Hub can help you with. We also want to make sure that we are aware that hiring preferences are prohibited. So we're offering equal opportunity, and we're also making sure that we have those equal opportunity policies and compliant procedures, and that we're maintaining the appropriate records for where we are conducting outreach, how we are conducting outreach, and to whom we are conducting outreach. We also need to make sure that we have a designated point of contact for our equal opportunity efforts. And again, that we are maintaining discrimination and harassment-free apprenticeship programs. Those are all pieces of how we do outreach and recruitment and how we later then operate our apprenticeship program. Very important to consider, and whether you have those appropriate policies and procedures into place. And again, that's something we can help you with if you don't. Targeted outreach, something we're really looking for at the Hub, and I'm sure many of you are looking for, is how do we diversify that apprenticeship pool? So when we think about current apprentices, most of them are white and most of them are male. We need to think about where are those sources of untapped talent, and how do we maybe generate interest among those groups in our apprenticeship program? We all know that diversity in the workplace can help us be a lot more better at problem solving, better at getting those business results, better at productivity, and we also can improve employee retention and recruitment. So that's something else to think about in terms of diversity. So how are we going to make sure that we are getting out there and targeting those other groups, looking at who might be able to help us? For example, groups like WIM, like we are talking to today. How could we engage with them? Community-based organizations. Are there community-based organizations that we might be able to work with in terms of targeting apprentices and potential recruits? So we want to be thinking very broadly about who's out there, not just thinking about schools, but what are some of the other organizations that we may be able to target and reach out to get potential apprenticeship candidates. We also want to take a look at developing a list of the apprenticeship sources. So I mentioned that back on our slide about the outreach tool. That's something else here. This slide is referring again to those sources of untapped talent. Who might those sources be, and making sure that we maintain a list of those sources. Also, we want to make sure that we are updating that list of sources annually. That's very important because we all know contacts and people change. So even if we have that contact information, making sure that we keep that updated. We also want to make sure we include our EEO pledge in any announcements that we put out there about our apprenticeship program. Using some data for better recruitment. So some successful uses of how we might use data. So again, we want to start collecting that data because it's the basis on which we can better inform our efforts. So we want to make sure that we are tracking things like, where are most of our apprentices coming from? How many potential candidates do we need to get into our recruitment funnel, if you will, to get down to one apprentice who enrolls with us? So using that data can really help us to drive our decisions and drive our planning for recruitment. Hard data can help us versus just using those assumptions. So I can't stress enough how we could develop and grow our program by starting to use data. So if you're not collecting as much data as you might like, again, that's something else we can help you with, is what's the right data to be collecting to help better inform your recruitment efforts. One example of data is a recruitment questionnaire. How did you learn about our program? So making sure that we are collecting this type of information. Who told them about our program and how did they find out about us? So that's really important because then we can get those trends and we can better target our recruitment efforts to the sources that are going to be most effective for us. Surveys. Surveys are another great way to start capturing information. Not only can we survey potential apprentices who might be wanting to engage with us, but we can also survey our current apprentices. They can provide us with lots of insight that can help us to better improve our marketing efforts, our recruitment efforts, and our general program efforts. They can also help us provoke discussion. So we see here a few examples of some of the surveys. We can survey people about the types of events we're doing, for example, and what might they suggest that we improve about our events that we put on to recruit. So that's an example. Data can also help us to take a look at what a potential apprentice or apprentice thinks about our brand and our program and start providing a baseline over time. So if today, for example, we see that people don't like, let's just say, the first potential class that we're doing with our apprenticeship, if we have that data, we can make some tweaks and improvements and see how that may change over time when we offer the class the next time, for example. So we want to be thinking about how do we collect that data so we have a baseline and we can see how and where we need to improve over time. I can't emphasize that enough. There was also a recent survey done, just an example of the kind of data that can be collected by New America. And one of the things it showed was the average age of apprentices in the US right now is 30. 1/5 are under 25 years old. And most apprenticeships, about 62%, are conferring a credential of some type. So that's just one example of some data that was gleaned about a survey for apprenticeship. There are all kinds of opportunities that we can look at with surveys to say, are we getting better with our program and where might we need to improve? Conducting focus groups. Again, I mentioned the apprenticeship accelerator that Dina and I were just involved with in Cincinnati. We had a mini focus group with those machining apprentices, and they were able to give us some of the feedback on their program and help us identify what they preferred about how to be recruited, what they liked about the apprenticeship, and why they felt that it was valuable to them. So focus groups of talking to current apprentices or even talking potentially to some potential apprentices out at a high school can give you a lot of really valuable data as far as what are they looking for in a program? How would they like to see it marketed? So really leveraging those insights and that qualitative data that we can gain from focus groups is great. Also, a focus group can be a great way to signal additional engagement and retention efforts with your current apprentices. So sitting them down and caring enough to capture information from them sends a message that their feedback is valued and valuable at your company. So this is another great tool that we highly recommend. And your local workforce board may even be able to help you pull one of these together to start learning more about some of the local workforce needs and some of the different partners. There may be an opportunity for you to pull together a focus group of your partners and talk about how do we work better together? How could we improve our efforts with you, etc. So these focus groups, again, I just can't emphasize enough how valuable they can be. We just did a couple of these focus groups in our area with some employers to kind of learn what they thought challenges were with the workforce. And it was very enlightening to see what we got. So it doesn't take a lot of time. These can be done in under an hour. So something I strongly encourage you to do. And I guarantee there will likely be surprises of things you haven't thought about coming out of these focus groups. Journey mapping. This is something else I really encourage you to take a look at. How is a potential candidate currently engaging with you? So really looking at it from the candidate's experience. When we think about an apprentice, what does that journey for them look like? So really mapping that out from initial contact all the way through to enrollment in the apprenticeship, it can help us to take a look at, are we offering support at the right times and the right places for those apprenticeships? Are we also looking at offering feedback appropriately to the apprentice? So I really encourage you to take a look at How do we actually visualize the apprenticeship experience? And I've got a little example over here of what a journey map may look like, but I really encourage you to take it from that candidate vantage point. And as you get an apprenticeship and an apprentice candidate into place, then talking to them and really mapping out that journey from, again, initial touch point all the way through to enrollment in an apprenticeship program. Mystery shopping, I mentioned this earlier. Have someone in your family or circle of friends actually try to start enrolling in your program and see what happens. What does that experience look like from their vantage point? We did this in the past with a group of state parks for them, and it was very, very interesting what we got by just having someone stop in and pretend to be interested and be a guest. We also are looking at a couple of companies that may want something like this done to just have that data and have that picture from someone in their circle of what is that experience like? If someone contacts us, what kind of follow-up is there for them? How is the apprentice being treated? It can also help us to take a look at where we might have gaps in our process that we haven't thought about. It's not necessarily something intentional, but it's just something that we haven't thought about or that just slipped through the cracks. So having someone actually apply in our circle that they're interested in our apprenticeship program and letting them take that through the process and then report back to us can be a very valuable way to get that feedback. And again, I guarantee you will get some surprises. So it's, I think, something I highly encourage you to take on in your organization. Mystery shop that process. And what is that like? You may also be surprised by how many clicks it takes. A mystery shopping was done recently of some job candidate applications to just get a job at a facility. And it took on average about 51 clicks for someone to actually get to the point where they were able to even submit an application. So those are the kinds of things that we can document and take a look at through our mystery shopping process. And is all of that really necessary? And might we be eliminating candidates because our process is too complex or too challenging for people and they just don't want to navigate it? Process mapping, I'm sure this is one we are all very familiar with. Focusing on our own internal processes and how those internal processes are working for us, and really documenting out that process. What does it look like now, and what might we want it to look like, and where are the bottlenecks in the process? So for example, if we have an apprentice coming into our funnel, if you will, but it's taking us a week to get back to them, that's probably a bottleneck. So the process map can help us really take a look at our own internal processes and how those are working for us and how those are working for apprentices. And this might be a great opportunity to get an apprentice actually engaged in this process map with you, because they have that feedback from their perspective of how that process worked for them. So this is a great opportunity to draw in others from your company who may not be as involved with apprenticeships either, and helping them understand that process and understand some of the challenges these days with recruiting. So again, process mapping, just something that I'm sure many of you are already using at your facilities. How could you leverage that to think about how you improve the apprenticeship process as well and bringing in that new talent? So we're really looking for those opportunities for improvement in our current processes with this one. And with that, we are concluded with our slide deck. Does anybody have any questions for us today? Any feedback, any thoughts?
Dorinda, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Christina, I see, has asked in the chat, Jen, how do we find that universal outreach tool? Dina, would you be able to maybe find the link to that and post that in the chat?
Yes, not a problem.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? And yes, I see another question. Can we share the slide with all the intermediaries? And the answer is yes. I believe, Jen, last time you sent the slide deck out afterwards, so I believe that will be going out today. And if you need help connecting to those intermediaries, we are more than happy to do that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Dorinda, if you could resend me in case there were any changes, but I will send them out probably tomorrow or Thursday. Once I have a chance to upload the recording, I'll send out both of them at the same time. And Dorinda, I have somebody asking for your email address for your and for you and your organization. So if you don't mind maybe putting that in the chat as well, we would all appreciate that.
Sure. I will type both Dina's and mine in the chat, so you all will have that. We would be more than happy to connect with you if you do have additional questions, thoughts, resources, ideas. We would be more than happy. I'd be interested to hear if anybody would be willing to type any ideas into the chat, what you all are using that's working well for recruitment. If there's anything that you have that you might like to share, or if somebody just wants to shout it out, if anybody has any strategies that they found to be successful. I really liked the video that you had at the beginning, Jen. So just curious if anybody has anything that they're already using that's working well for recruitment that they might like to share.
And we do, and for those who would like to know, on our YouTube channel, we do have, I believe we have 8 different videos similar to that. So you are welcome to borrow the link and send it out. That's what it's there for, to help get everybody on there. And while everybody else is typing maybe things that have worked for them, Lisa, if you go to the Women in Manufacturing website, so if you go to womeninmanufacturing.org, you will see our resource center. And underneath the resource center, it'll say registered apprenticeship programs. So you could find all that information there as well. So you could find everything on our homepage. Just sometimes people have a hard time finding it. So, but it's definitely, it's under resource center.
So where are the best practices? I haven't seen anything come in from the group. I'm interested to hear, what is it that's working for you all? Or maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're struggling and something hasn't worked yet, but we would certainly be interested to hear if there's a best practice or unique idea that you have that you found that's working really well.
Now, Dorinda, and forgive me, I had to step away for just a second, and maybe you touched base on this. But have you seen more companies go into like career fairs in high schools to recruit?
Yes, we definitely have. So the event that I was mentioning that Dina and I just did in Cincinnati, those students were talking, those machining apprentices, about how many companies were coming in to recruit them. So I think they said that as many as 25 companies were there to recruit machining apprentices. So yes, we're definitely seeing more engagement at the high school level. I think that students seem to be hungry for that also. I mentioned that statistic about how 78% of students would kind of like to have a career plan while they're still in high school. So I think there's a lot more interest in that. And depending on the state that you're in, some states are actually encouraging things like business advisory councils, or they're also encouraging things like industry recognized credentials. So yeah, we're definitely seeing a lot more interest at that high school level. And thank you, Perez. I see what you're talking about here with partnering up with local colleges. We really appreciate that. So it sounds like that's worked out pretty well for you.
And in the chat, Dorinda, Lisa asked, have you had any interaction with a group called FAME? We are learning about that group, but not sure if they are a registered apprenticeship.
So yes, I'm aware of FAME and definitely know a little bit about FAME. I'm not sure if all of the programs are registered. I think in some states they are, and in others they aren't necessarily. Dina, you may be able to speak to that a little bit about FAME.
Yeah, that's correct. So they all do everything separately. It's almost like a franchise model for FAME. So there are definitely FAME programs that are registered, and there's quite a few that are not. It just depends on where they are. I know Kentucky FAME program is. There's some others, but they all do run sort of independently, and they have a board that sort of convenes them, and it just depends on how they run it. Some are very interested in being registered and some just don't have an interest in that. So it's a mixed bag.
And Dina, we had a question from Ryan as well in the chat about what is the difference between an OA and an SAA state. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, and we could also possibly get that fact sheet out to Ryan, or talk about where that's located, because we just did a fact sheet on this, Ryan.
Yeah, there's states that are really run by the Office of Apprenticeship federally, and then there's those that are run by the state. I mean, that's really the difference. So they're called state apprenticeship. It's state apprenticeship, I think, like association, state apprenticeship. And then the OA is just Office of Apprenticeship, meaning they don't have any kind of state, regulations, but they roll up to the federal office. And there's a map actually on the apprenticeship.gov website. And I don't know if, Jen, you guys have a map of SAA states versus OA states. But there's a map where they basically show you which states are which. Some states use the Rapids system, which is basically their informational system where they put all the apprentice information in, and some of them have their own. So it's really how, they're set up. But in terms of working with an intermediary, like us, we work with all states. So even if they're OA states or SAA states, bottom line is they're still registered by either state government or federal government. So there really isn't a huge difference. It's just some prefer to have the government, the federal agency register their programs, and others do it themselves. Hopefully it's a short answer. I mean, there's some other differences.
And I did mention to Ryan that if Ryan would like to email, I'll be happy to send out our fact sheet, Dina.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of information on the differences, but bottom line is they just, it just depends on how they want to do it. And then is there a difference between the apprenticeship and a co-op? I mean, there's definitely a big difference. A registered apprenticeship has those 5 categories that you have to meet. It's a paid job. You're getting paid as you're learning. So it's earn as you learn model. There's an in-classroom training that has to happen 144 hours minimum. And then there's on the job training, which is a minimum of 2,000 hours for most apprenticeship programs. You have to have those 2 pieces. A co-op can be set up totally differently, but for a registered apprenticeship, you have to have that. You have to have an industry recognized portable credential at the end of the program that the trainees can take with them. You have to have a mentorship component, and you have to have some kind of wage progression, meaning you have to start them at a certain point, and when they graduate, they have to end up higher. So there's these 5, they call them hallmarks of registered apprenticeship, that you will not be able to get your program registered if you don't meet them. A co-op or an internship can be set up very differently, but we're talking about, programs that have those 5 hallmarks.
And I see another question from Terry. She's asked, how about military personnel transitioning to civilian life?
In terms of what?
I'm not quite sure. Terry, if you want to maybe expand a little bit in the chat on that, maybe we could help you.
You mean how we help military personnel to transition, like through apprenticeship? Is that what you mean?
Maybe.
There's definitely tons of resources for vets. I mean, I'll just say that. They're all listed actually on our website as well as the Department of Labor website, but there's programs that veterans and those folks that are, transitioning out of the military into civilian life can tap into. There are many organizations that can sort of help with that. We do provide a lot of those resources to folks who are interested. So I would say reach out to us. We can give you some of those resources. There are, financial resources that are available for those folks who would like to get into a RAP. For the most part, if they're already employed, the employer or the institution that's training them is going to provide a lot of that support. But there are state level, incentives and different things like that can definitely benefit vets specifically, because they are definitely a target audience and a target population of Office of Apprenticeship. So, for instance, our specific intermediate project focuses on people of color and veterans. So there's quite a bit. I can put in the chat the link to our website page where we talk about, all the benefits to the vets.
All right. And I did put in my email address as well. But I am able to get in touch with Dina and Dorinda. So if you maybe missed their email address or their contact information earlier, reach out to me. I'm very happy to get you in touch with these 2 wonderful women. There's also the Workforce Hub website that I am going to copy and put into the chat as well. So that will also go out to everybody. So if you have any questions, both of us, we're very good resources to help you with, and we could get you in touch with whoever is needed. But I do want to thank Dorinda and Dina for joining us today and for being have some great information for everybody. I learned a ton today, so I very much appreciate it. And I see some of the chats coming in of how much they enjoyed it today. And for those of you watching this and want to share this with other people as well, like I said, I will be putting this on the Women in Manufacturing YouTube page, and I will send out a link to you. It does take some time for me to upload and everything like that, but I'm going to email everybody who registered for today's event. Feel free to share with whoever you would like to see this, or you could go back and reference some of the ideas yourself. So Dorinda, Dina, thank you for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Jen. Thanks for all the great questions, everybody.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you for your engagement and attendance, and thank you, Jen.
All right. And thank you everybody for joining us today, and have a good rest of the week. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.